All right, we are going to be beginning our next project, and our next project is working in a series or working with a small group of multiples. So when we talk about creating a series, you will be making 3 small paintings that go together as a series. We're going to be using the postcard-sized papers that are in your kit. So in your kit, you have a stack of 3, I think they're like 4x6 watercolor sheets. Working in a series means that your paintings share a theme, a topic, or some sort of core idea. It also means that in addition to that theme or core idea, they share a similar style, a similar color palette, or a similar composition so that they feel like good paintings if we only see one of them, but they also will feel like they belong together if we see them together as a little group of 3. Artists very often work in a series. They don't just make one painting of something. They very often have some sort of internalized theme or subject matter that they're working with, and they work with it repetitively. Not so all their paintings are the same, but so that all of their paintings feel like they belong together. It is actually what causes you to begin to recognize that artwork that you're seeing comes from that same artist. Every painting will be different, but they need to connect to each other so that they, like I said, they look like they belong together. It is sort of like thinking like you're making family members for your paintings. So they should be different but belong together. We can look at art history and we can see that artists very often work in series. That series, this series, for example, is Pablo Picasso. This is one of his earlier bodies of work before he got super abstract. And this work is called the Blue Period. You'll notice that the work, each individual painting is separate, like we could see them one at a time and they don't feel like they're missing something, but that each painting also belongs in this group. They all have figures, they all share a very common color palette. The 2 of them have a very similar composition or pose for the figures, and you can see that that figure pose, kind of that hunched and curled up pose, has been repeated in the background of the 3rd and final image. So artists have worked this way for basically for always. Artists kind of get an idea in their head and they sort of work through that idea until they're done with it, and they move on to the next idea, and then they work through that idea until they're done with that one, and then they come up with the next one. So this is a really common way for artists to work. We can look at a more recent artist, Wayne Thiebaud, and he is still alive, still making work here in the United States. He first became a super popular artist when he started painting desserts. So here are 3 separate paintings from his dessert series, and you can see they share some kind of common structures, right? We're focusing on the idea of cake for these 3. His shadows are always a really cool color. So, and by cool color, I mean blue and purple. So you'll notice none of his shadow work is black. It's all very dark blue or dark purple. He has a very graphic application of highlight and shadow, and he has kind of made these cakes into a pattern. So he very often focuses on multiple of the same object in his painting. He moved on to also working with household objects, where he would paint shoes in a row or neckties in a closet. And he is currently working in landscape. So this is his most recent body of work. He has two different ones where he is doing street scenes, and then he is doing these, the far left is like a view out the airplane window. So if you've ever flown and looked out the window, the landscape kind of looks like a quilt with the different colors. But you can see we have some common elements from his previous work. He uses very bright color. He has a very graphic application of the paint. His shadows are blue rather than black. And so even though these first images are cake and these next images are landscapes, they still feel a little like they came from the same artist. So you can see that artists, as they continue to work, they continue to come up with series for themselves. I have a few other examples of artists who are working in a series. These next few are a young artist in America here. Her name is Gwen Simmel. And you can see these are 3 vegetables from her kitchen. Now they share some commonalities, right? They're all green vegetables. We have parsley, we have jalapeno pepper, and we have leeks. They're all predominantly green and white. And she has made a complementary color scheme out of all of these paintings by using kind of pinky reds in the background. She also does a lot of pattern work in the background, so they would look nice separate from each other, but they all clearly also belong together as a group. Gwen has many different bodies of work, and she very often comes up with a theme that gives her a lot of variation. She has done a wildlife safari theme. She has done, this is from her environmental group where she's talking about bees and pesticides and flowers. She's done a lot of portrait work where she's done family members or neighbors from the same neighborhood. But again, you can see these are separate paintings that sort of belong together in this group. These are bees. These are common backyard flowers, or in some cases, the dandelion is a weed that a lot of people would kill or pull up, but the bees need them as food. This is also Gwen's work from her African Safari series. All pairs of animals, all animals that come from Africa. Again, her color work, her design work, her patterning in the background all links these pieces together as a group or series. I have a few more examples just to kind of get you thinking of how you can work in a series. Notice the very common color. Notice also, though, if they were looked at separately, they wouldn't feel unfinished or like we wondered where the rest of the painting was. This series here has more than 3. This is how an artist works. She says she does small self-portraits anytime she's stuck. So she ends up with lots and lots of these, but you can see that any 3 of these would work to make a series because it is the same portrait every time, just done differently, different facial expression or different other elements in the photo. A couple of other examples. Final example done in watercolor using hands. Notice the complementary color scheme, like those have been painted primarily using orange and blue. We are going to begin by brainstorming ideas that you have for a theme or topic for your series. This can be nearly anything. You can do separate images that would tell us a story. You can explore a concept. It can be a concept that's important to you. It can be a social issue. It can be something that's going on in the world right now. Or it can just be related imagery that follows an idea. You want to make sure that you're using something that feels interesting or important to you so that the painting project kind of has value to you as a person. You'll need to think about how you want each painting to look and how you're going to get the images to relate to one another. Common things to get them to relate to one another, obviously, We've talked a lot about like kind of color or stylistic choices that you make as you're making the paintings themselves. You're then going to need to find reference photos to sustain your idea or your plan. You're going to need to have at least one reference photo for each of the paintings you're creating. It's a possibility that you would need more than one. For instance, if I'm going to paint those chickadees, maybe that's just the image of the bird that I use, but in the background I go ahead and put like the back of my house and a bird feeder, right? So then I would still need a reference photo for the back of my house and a bird feeder, even though I have the poses for the chickadees. For this project, making or creating your own reference photos is probably the quickest route to reference photos, particularly if I am doing everyday objects. If I'm going to be painting a series of Converse tennis shoes, I'm just going to go to my closet and I'm going to take some photos of my tennis shoes that I'm going to use, rather than looking on the internet for reference photos for my project. It's going to take me longer to find reference photos than it is for me to make reference photos. So that's something that you want to consider, is that you're making something that's personally relevant, and personally relevant to the point that you're going to be able to take the reference photos for this work. If you are finding reference photos rather than making your own reference photos, you are going to have to use copyright-free images. So you're going to have to use Morgfile, you're going to have to use Pixabay, and I'll post links to those sites here in Google Classroom. So here is your assignment for today. You need to brainstorm to create a list of possible topics or themes to use for your series, and you're going to do that right in your sketchbook. So you can see that is my sketchbook page, where from when I was teaching you guys how to do underpainting for our still life project, and I just went ahead and used the spare space around that practice area of those tomatoes to brainstorm for my multiples list. Remember, when you brainstorm, you are not judging. You're just vomiting down every idea that comes to mind, regardless of how good or how bad it is, okay? You're then going to read back through that list and find the one that feels most interesting to you. Then you're going to need to plan your views, okay? So for instance, one of my brainstorming things, I have a lot of choices that are portraits there. I have the same person at different ages. So maybe I'm going to use myself. Maybe I'm a senior this year and I'm going to use my senior portrait because that's like the most current, or I'm going to take a picture of myself right now, a little selfie. And maybe I'm going to find a baby photo, and I'm going to find a photo of me when I'm like 8 to 10. So I'm going to need to go back through some photo albums or whatever and find some pictures of me at different times in my life to use for each project. Then I need to plan the color. What am I going to do with color to kind of help create unity between these three paintings? So maybe if I'm going to follow that idea, right, that I'm going to do the same person all at different ages, maybe I'm thinking about using a common color scheme throughout the three paintings. So instead of doing realistic color for all of them, maybe I'm thinking, my favorite color is green, and so I'm going to do like an analogous color scheme, and I'm going to use green and blue, green, and blue to make all of the paintings, and that way they'll all be the same color, but the face will change each time. Obviously, well, I already talked about this, you're going to have to either create or find your reference photos, okay? Now I have one of the other things, I kind of like the idea of playing around with a recipe and doing like raw ingredients and then them somehow chopped and prepped and then finished. And so one idea I have there is to do apple pie. Well, obviously, for my first image, I'm going to find pile of apples in my kitchen, right? And I'm gonna set them out in a little still life and take a picture. Then I'm gonna chop an apple and maybe have it on the cutting board with a knife, take a picture. And then I need the picture of an apple pie, maybe cut open so I can see the inside of the pie, or a slice on a plate so that I can see that kind of a story that I'm making for myself. So that's gonna involve me being in my kitchen, kind of prepping those things, you know, so that I can make a story. So whether you're creating and taking your own reference photos or you're finding those reference photos, you see how hard that would be if I was going to do the apple pie thing. It could take me a while to look for those as copyright images online. You're then going to upload your 3 reference photos to Google Classroom today. So this is your job today. You're going to do your brainstorming. You're going to look back at your ideas and kind of think about, okay, if I'm doing this idea, what photos do I need? What photos do I have to make? And I'm going to start looking for those, and I will need to upload all 3 of those photos today to Google Classroom so that I am ready to start my project.